Okay, today I've got a challenge that I'm really not up to. I just don't know about this one. So we got a Stihl chainsaw from 1971. That's when I was born. I've already broke into this once. He gave me the chainsaw and said the rope wasn't working, and it was just pulling straight up. There was something not engaging in there. So I spent about an hour trying to figure out how to get the cover off. Finally, I decided to go ahead and pull up a YouTube video, and there's screws and Allen screws everywhere on this machine. It was nerve-wracking, especially with it being an antique. So I figured out what was wrong, and I'll show you that once I get it opened up again. What was wrong with the pull rope. But when I got it all back together, first of all, I didn't get the handle put together correctly, so I'll have to look at that, which I would have corrected anyways. That's beside the point. But when I tried to start it, the carburetor there's something wrong with the carburetor. So I went in and looked for parts. I found one used one on eBay, and I wasn't, confident that it was going to work. So I told the guy, I said, there's no parts available. We can do a rebuild kit, maybe, but for you to know, or for him to know, or anybody to know, rebuilds are only about 50% success rate. And you can watch YouTube videos and eventually you'll hear someone else say that. It's not just me. So, and make it worse is rebuilds of 2-cycle engines is pretty bad. They got a diaphragm in there that dries up, and you have to replace them. So there was a rebuild kit. I went in and got it. It wasn't that bad. It was like $13. But I went ahead and priced it kind of high because it's going to take a lot of labor to get all this apart again. And I figured, he's not going to want to sell it. So I looked up what collectors are, paying for these things. You can get, for a new running one, not new, but running one, you can get $300-400 out of it. For ones that are not running, you can get $200 out of it. So I told him that, and he said, no, I'd like to go ahead and give it a shot. I said, I want to be clear on this. I don't want to ruin my reputation. It may not work. He said, that's okay. So we're going to try it, but I want you to understand that we may dig into this, and at the end of the video, it doesn't work. I don't like having videos where I don't know the outcome. But you might learn something. I used to work on lawnmowers with my grandpa when I was very young, 10, 11 years old. And these are the kind of things I remember with points. They got points, and nowadays they have ignition coils. But it used to be points. But what was interesting is inside the case here that the chainsaw came in was this screwdriver, and this is the exact screwdriver set my grandpa had. So I'm going to open this up. Wish me the best. I did not tighten the screws very tight when I put it back together, just in case something like this happened. They were on so tight, it was very difficult to get them off. Now the other thing is I'm going to be very careful about what I'm doing here. So I'm sitting on the concrete. I'm going to make sure that I don't lose any parts because I can't replace them. There's just nothing for them. And there's, like I said, screws everywhere. And there's one screw way in the back, hidden underneath the spark plug. You can't even see that you got to get out. It's an Allen screw. I was watching the video, and in the comment section, there were people saying, I've had this in my shop for 20 years, or 10 years, whatever it was, and I didn't know how to take it apart. Thanks for the video. So I wasn't feeling too stupid that I was the only one that couldn't figure it out. So this is where the carburetor is, underneath this. Here's the choke here. But you got to get this whole cover off. When you're removing these nuts on any machine like this, Make sure you got the choke closed, because you don't want that nut to fall down into the carburetor throat. It's hard to get out. That. See, the thing is, you know, I said I didn't get this handle right, but it's working now that I loosened that screw up. He had tape on it wrapped around this. I'm betting that might have been, may not have been my fault. I thought I put it in there, so now it's working right. Now that I've loosened the screw, that's interesting. Now there's a spring in here, so you got to be careful. I wasn't careful the first time. Should mention why I'm wearing a coat. It's middle of July and it's 60 degrees outside. Quite chilly. Now the YouTube video took this handle assembly completely off, but there's linkages connected to it. I didn't take it completely off, and I was still able to get it disassembled. So I'm gonna try not to do that, take it off, or because I don't want to have to try to figure out how to reassemble a bunch of stuff. Okay, so there is a Allen screw. You got to take the spark plug wire off, and I got to be careful with the spark plug wire because there's a big cut in it and there's no replacements for it. Okay, so there I have an Allen wrench. You might see the Allen wrench right here. Way down there next to the spark plug wire is an Allen screw. Now if you don't know about that Allen screw, you're not getting this apart. So that's where the video really came into play. Something I should mention was the owner or the previous owner of this machine did not have this Allen screw in there all the way. So I don't know if he had trouble getting it back together. Alright, here we go. So let's see. The handle should come loose. Okay, so that's loose. And then this cover should come off now, if I've done my job right. It's starting to fall off already. There it went. There it went. Pretty dirty. Alright. Flipping on its side. So, the reason the rope wouldn't pull was these two inertia, or what do you want to call them, the springs on them. I don't know if you can see the springs, but there's springs on them. They weren't put on correctly. It took me about 20 minutes to figure out how to put it on, but once I got them on, it worked great. I know some troll's going to tell me, oh, you should have known this before you got started. What I discovered was the gas tank connection had a missing O-ring, and it was just out of place. It wasn't missing, it was just out of place. And also the fuel filter was sticking way up, so the gas may not have been getting into it. Of course, I drained the gas out of it so I could do this. So I'm going to put it back together and see if it'll run. Look at that. This has an ignition coil. I think that's an ignition coil. So I'm going to put it back together, see what happens. If it runs, that'd be great. All right, so it looks like we got it running. So I'm going to put it back together and start it again, just to make sure that everything's working after I get it all put together. You know, sometimes strange things happen, but that was pretty incredible. I'm sure when I was out there cutting firewood, or well, I picked up the limbs with my grandparents, that they had these chainsaws just like this one. My grandpa always had home light, but there's no safety mechanisms on this at all. There's no chain brake, and I'm telling you, that chain brake that sits right here on newer, really, I guess, gives you a sense of security, because now it isn't there. It's terrifying that blade is just racing around. But I guess after lots of cut legs off, people decided to put a chain brake on it. I like the chain brake. So we'll get some of these screws put in, and I'm going to try to get this handle in correctly. And I can't forget about that one screw on the side, but the muffler is hot right now and it's sitting right next to the muffler. I'm not really sure I'm interested in touching that one right away. I had to rehydrate the diaphragm on these 2-cycle carburetors. There's a kind of like a paperish, I'm not going to call it paper, but paperish material that lays right on top of it, and it's called a diaphragm, and those get dried out. That's the second time that one's loosened up on me. I might put some Loctite on that one. So what you do when it's been sitting around and it gets dried out, you start it up and then you immediately start manipulating the choke back and forth. Don't let it die, full throttle, and it'll get hydrated. Well, the problem was it was hydrated. I could tell it was hydrated, but the carburetor needed adjusted, the high-low. So and that just took a little bit of effort. So when the throttle is off, you want the low, which it says L right here on the, you adjust that one, and then on the high, when it's full throttle, you adjust that one. So I had to do all that while trying to keep it running, but we finally got it to work out. You might have seen that I was adjusting it. What I was trying to do, you saw when I was pushing the trigger, it would start to bog down. So you adjust the high. Then I came over here because this one seemed like it was adjusted correctly, and this is just the carburetor throttle, and so I screwed that one out a little. So the blade, I forget what I did, but the blade was spinning too fast. You don't want it to spin when it's just idling. So we got that adjusted, and it's running perfect. They say they don't make them like they used to. Well, I suppose that's true. The problem with the way they used to is they're harder to work on. I would imagine that they hadn't really tried to figure out a way to cut assembly costs, the assembly lines in the manufacturing company. They just had to, because assembling something like this would just cost so much. We'll see what happens with this handle. It's not working correctly. It's all broke. I'm sure you can't find a new one. I'm going to have to mess with that some. See if I can get it to work better. But the point is it's running. And I've been terrified about this ever since I told him that the carburetor had an issue. I'll probably look at the costs a little bit and see if we can reduce it, since it wasn't needing a rebuild. But it did take a little bit of work. So the research time, I think, is part of the issue. He wants me to work on an antique that, You know, it just hasn't been around in a long time. So I think the research needs to be part of the cost. So if you'll click this up next box, it'll take you to a video. I was working on something. So I hope I can inspire you to overcome your fears when you're living your dreams. Thanks for watching.